Good day. This is the Kansas Association of School Boards Leadership Services. You are here to listen to board agenda development. Thank you for the time that you're willing to spend with us. How can a board agenda keep the focus on student success? I understand that that is the item that you are most focused on, but when you get together, how can your short amount of time to focus on student success be used within your agenda? So many of you wonder, how is your board agenda developed? At this point, I encourage you to pause, and while you're paused, ask this question: how is your agenda developed? So please pause at this point. Thank you. Well, I hope you had a great conversation about how that is developed, and I'm sure you found that in most cases, or very common, would be for the board president, possibly the vice president, to meet with the superintendent, possibly the board clerk the week before, to finalize the agenda. The board president is the gatekeeper, can either choose to add or delete something from the agenda. So if you need to add something to the agenda, typical process would be if you call the superintendent, he or she may call the board president, or they may ask you to call the board president to get things on the agenda. Getting things on the agenda is extremely important. So before you ask to put something on the agenda, you should contemplate if it is absolutely necessary. With that said, you definitely are aware of your particular district's agenda. Your agenda items can probably be placed within 4 different quadrants. We're going to spend a little time going through these. Quadrant 1 are the agenda items that are considered very urgent and they're important. These are the quadrant of necessity. Quadrant 2 are the items that are not urgent, yet very important. This is the quality, or the quadrant of quality. Quadrant 3, items that are urgent, yet not important. This is the quadrant of deception. Quadrant 4, not urgent, not important. This would be considered the quadrant of waste. So it's very important for board members and boards as a whole to be able to identify the difference between important agenda items and urgent. So an agenda item that's considered important contributes to the mission, the values, the beliefs, and the high priority goals. An agenda item that is considered urgent if the board feels it requires immediate attention. So if you as a board believe this to be true, how might a board develop agreement on what's important and what's urgent? So I urge you to consider pause at this point and discuss the question: how could you as a board team, develop an agreement on what's important and what's urgent? Please pause now. Thank you. I am fully aware that most likely that you were not able to come to complete agreement on importance and urgent. This is something that's done over the matter of time, but it is important at some point there is a consensus on what you believe importance versus urgent. Well, urgent versus important. Maybe this will give you a better idea. The problem in our today's world, urgency is the dominating factor in our lives. The more urgent issues, these are the pressing matters, the more you deal with urgent issues, the less time you have for what's important. So within your private life, think about the emails, the texts, the items that you constantly are doing that are probably keeping you from doing the work that you know within your heart are the important things. So getting back to the quadrants. Quadrant 1 is urgent. We can agree that they're urgent. We can probably agree they're important. So the bulleted items might be items of which you would see within your agenda that would fit within Quadrant 1. The quadrant of necessity is the urgent and important. And board, this may sound different than what you would immediately think, but you should try to reduce these items within your agenda when possible. These are the tasks that need immediate attention. Many times they require immediate attention because you haven't spent enough time in quadrant 2. These are items that you're putting out fires, you're firefighting, they're reactive. And obviously all of us would like to be more proactive than reactive. Do you have to be in quadrant 1 at times? Absolutely. But once again, you want to reduce the frequency of these items. So if you have time, you might want to consider, how can you as a board become more proactive? Quadrant 2, quadrant of quality. These are the items that are considered not urgent, yet they're very important. The bulleted items that we put up here are the strategic planning. It's working towards your district goals, relationship building, values clarification, and preparation for what needs to occur in the future. These are the items you need to increase the frequency within your board meetings. These need to be items of which you see every board meeting. They're habitual. These are the proactive actions that will reduce you from spending too much time being reactive, which is quadrant 1. So quadrant 2, as I just mentioned, these will help you reduce quadrant 1 issues. Increasing time spent in this quadrant enhances your chance for success. If you ignore quadrant 2, your board will always be forced back to quadrant 1 because now you're being forced to be reactive. Remember, board, you control the agenda, so you control quadrant 2. This is the quadrant of leadership. So as a reminder, the less time you spend in quadrant 2 will force you to be reactive, which means you'll have more agenda items in quadrant 1. We're all from Kansas, so I think we understand the concept of the laws of harvest. But I want you to think about the law of harvest and how understanding that may allow us to work in quadrant 2. You can't expect to have a quality harvest if you don't prepare the fields, fertilize or fallow, plant the seeds, provide moisture, and then harvest when it's ripe. So what I'd like the board to do at this point is, how does the law of harvest relate to Board of Education work? Please consider pausing at this point and have a great dialogue. Thank you for that conversation, and I hope your conversations will lead you to understanding the importance of agenda development and prioritizing your agenda items for student success. So if we go back to quadrant 4, not back, but to quadrant 3, excuse me, urgent, not important. This is definitely the quadrant of deception. The board really needs to manage these items. These are items that really appear worth doing. So think of your time as a board member, the phone calls, the interruptions that obviously are urgent by the person talking to you, but may or may not be important. So this is the quadrant of deception. The noise of urgency creates the illusion of importance. This quadrant can deceive a board to believe they're in quadrant 1, urgent and important. But this is really where boards and board members need to be able to discern the difference between what's important and not important. Quadrant 4. This is the items within your board agenda that are considered not urgent and they're not important. This is simply the quadrant of waste. If you can identify agenda items that you think fit within quadrant 4, you need to try to avoid these. You need to try to get these off of the board agenda. Wasting your time. These are activities that waste your time to do the more valuable things that you need to do as a board member. This matrix, once again, has the 4 quadrants. It does have some simple definitions of each of these. I hope you'll have an opportunity to look at these. You can see the important items are the items that are the top two. The urgent items are the two items on the left side. So you want to spend as much time as you possibly can in quadrant 2. So an activity is urgent when it feels it requires immediate attention. Would you rather be reactive or proactive? And if you're able to answer that as proactive, then quadrant 2 is where you need to spend a majority of your time. So with that said, I hope that you have had great conversation as it relates to board agenda development, and that it will make a difference on how you run your board meetings in the future. Thank you for your time.